What's going on, everybody? John Eric Pauli here with My MMA News, and today's guest will be fighting Jasmine Jasudavicius at UFC 289. That fight date, June 10th. Always great to catch up with Miranda Maverick. Miranda, nice to see you. How's everything going?
Going good. A great Sunday. Gonna take a little rest, go on a bike ride, stuff like that today.
All right. Well, I won't take up too much of your time today. I know you have a lot to get to today, a little light training session there. So let's start here. This fight, right, your first one of 2023, kind of at like the midway point of the year, too. I know you did fight in late 2022. Was that the plan to kind of get it in this time frame, or were you trying to get in earlier?
I was trying to get a fight much earlier, around the February timeframe. June's a little bit later than that. I still like to get 3 fights within a year. I try to stay active. It seems like a lot of people don't understand how it works, but we don't get to choose when we fight, right? We get matches offered to us, and it's not always when we want them to be. I wish it would have been earlier, but I'm happy to at least be fighting now. I was told it might be July, and so I was reaching out to every girl I knew trying to get a fight, and Jasmine said yes.
Well, it's good that we have one here. And I was actually going to say, too, just to, go along the lines of what you were saying there for maybe the fans that don't realize, too, like when you're fighting in November, they're already booking matchups already in like that February time frame. So I know it makes it, a little complicated there. But I did want to ask you, too, as far as like rankings go and everything. I know you're ranked number 15 in the world. Jasmine's obviously not ranked. I know she's beaten a few girls and everything. She's off to a pretty decent start in her career there. But were you surprised given, your record 4-2, you're ranked that they gave you somebody behind you, or did none of that matter? It was just about getting a fight in?
It was just about getting a fight. I'm the one that called out Jasmine. I was the one that asked her to fight me. I saw her last fight and I was like, hey, want to dance sometime soon on Twitter? And I messaged her personally as well. And I was like, hey, I'll respect. You did great in your fight. I'm just trying to look for a fight. If you want to fight me, let me know. And she replied. We got the media going on it, and Mick finally got the matchup set up, which was great.
Yeah, next thing you know, there's a fight here just like that. The other thing that I wanted to ask you, too, just in terms of like where things fall and everything, when I was doing the prep work for this interview, I'm looking at your record, right, just for the UFC there, 4-2. Completely forgot, right? That split decision loss to Macy Barber. I had all like these flashbacks to it. And I thought you clearly won that fight. Most of the media members and fans thought you won that fight. Obviously, being 5-1 puts you in a little bit different position. Do you ever kind of look back at that and have any frustrations, or is all that, behind you? You don't think too much about it?
I think a lot about it. Every time before I fight, I actually watch that fight a lot just to kind of get my nerves going, get that frustration going, get in there and fight with a little bit more fuel behind me. It is frustrating that happened after rewatching the fight after the decision was made. I, of course, was even madder than I was during the decision. Just frustrating how it works. There could be a lot of changes, and it'll take, everybody kind of banding together, and a lot of changes within all of the commissions for the judging and the criteria for the fights to change.
Yeah, I know that's definitely something that has to be addressed and hopefully keeps getting better over time. The other thing, though, I wanted to ask you just along kind of these lines, and this is something more or less just with your career in general. It was crazy to think. I didn't even realize, right, when I'm going through it, right, I'm seeing, okay, we just went over, right, the 4-2 in the UFC. You also fought in Invicta. You've been in the UFC now for 3 years, and then you're 25 years old. I couldn't believe that when I saw it. I'm like, Wow. I couldn't believe, like, there's people, like, getting their UFC contracts for the first time at 25 years old. So being that you were so young kind of when you got into the UFC, how much did you kind of have to learn on the job?
Not too much. I was ready. I waited and waited to get into the UFC. And by that, I mean, I had several UFC offers prior to when I finally took it. They were just going to be short notices or kind of fed to the wolves kind of things. It was like one-off contracts, or, I got offered, my first ever offer for the UFC was a 3-day notice fight against Antonina Shevchenko back when she was at her height. And I was like 3-0 or something. And I was like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to go to the UFC with 3 pro fights under my belt at the age of 19 years old. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And so I waited and I waited and I waited until the right moment when they offered me the 4-fight contract. Then COVID came around, it knocked it out. And I finally got to make my debut in June of 2020. And then it got knocked back again because of my own eye injuries that I didn't know about. And then finally had my debut in October. But I was really ready to do it. I feel like I jumped in at a good time. I beat Liana, and then I got to fight Jillian, who at the time was ranked. and I was in a really good position. And the loss to Macy kind of set me back, and that's why it's so frustrating, is seeing where she's at and then seeing where I'm at now. I'm getting paid, and that's all I really care about. And it's not like I get paid more by fighting ranked opponents, but it definitely helps for future negotiations.
Well, hopefully we'll be getting a lot bigger matchups coming up here on the horizon after a nice performance here at UFC 289. Let's get into the UFC 289 stuff now. Obviously, training camp going on right now out there in Colorado. Just how's camp been going?
It's good. It's good. Only a couple weeks left of hard training. I'm excited. I've had, the sad, unfortunate part of Raquel Pennington not getting the fight what would have been yesterday. And now she's a backup for the title fight during my card. So June 10th is great for me because I get to train with her all the weeks leading up to my fight. It's been great training with her, having a bigger, stronger opponent, holding me against the cage, a weight class above. I'm going to blow through Jasmine is how I feel.
So now, obviously, you mentioned there about how great camp's been. You mentioned training with people like Raquel. I know before we came on air here and started recording, you were telling me that Denver is going to be home until you decide to retire. Obviously, you're very happy with everything out there. How much of the training out there has kind of, led to some of the successes that you've had in the career, especially recently, too, obviously, winner of your last two?
I feel like a lot. My coaches are very good at the whole fight IQ, making game plans. And that's something that I think I lacked a little bit in the past, is just the specific game planning for opponents. I'm improving as a whole. Like, all of my technique is improving. And then for each opponent, we just put the building blocks together to not only beat them, but to develop myself within that fight. And that's what the big focus has been. So I'm pretty excited to go in there and just show how well-rounded I've been in the past, put it all together again, and get up there in the top 15, keep moving my way up.
All right, let's talk Jasmine here a little bit. So you had mentioned earlier in the interview, you had actually called out Jasmine. What is it about this matchup that excites you, that you want at this fight, and what do you see in her as an opponent?
One, she has a lot of fan base behind her. She has the whole Canadian crowd behind her. She's doing very well currently, kind of has some hype built up behind her from her wins, is known as a good wrestler, a good grappler, especially against the wall. I haven't seen her fight too many grapplers, though, to be honest. I don't see her going in there against anyone else that grapples very well. And I think that's going to be kind of a shock to the system for her when she fights me. And I feel like I have a lot more volume and power going into the striking, but she looked good. She has a good attitude. I like Jasmine as a person, too. And I'm excited to get in there and share the cage with her.
And you mentioned her having the whole country of Canada behind her. Fights are obviously in Canada. Canadian fans are usually pretty nice, but you never know. Are you expected to maybe get some booze there on fight week?
Maybe a little bit. For sure, the booze. Yeah, I don't think that I'll get, mugged or something outside. At least I hope not. But Canada so far has seemed like a pretty cool place to go. Fans have been nice to me over social media, at least. But while I'm there, I expect to get booze. That's not a problem for me. If anything, it just fuels the fire going into the cage. The only thing I've got to say to them is their taxes suck.
I know, tough thing for the fighters there too, having to pay all the different stuff like that there. And a lot of fans don't realize that either. Some money has to come out of your pocket to get the fights there. I do want to have a few other UFC 289 conversations though here before we start wrapping things up. I want to start with the main event that night with Amanda Nunes, Irene Aldana. Obviously you mentioned Raquel's the backup for it. Obviously I'm sure Raquel probably had some conversations of wanting the fight when Juliana Pena called out. Just give us your thoughts on everything that kind of all transpired there.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating for her, especially as us as teammates. Irene has lost to Raquel before, and Raquel's on a 5-fight win streak. And for them to hype up just because Irene's a Mexican fighter was the excuse that Dana made. That's kind of frustrating from Raquel's standpoint. But, she's promotable. She's going to go in there and be able to be a good opponent for Nunes. We'll see what happens. And I'm excited that Raquel's able to come out there with me for my fight camp. We've been training ready for her title fight potentially, right? And yeah, she's excited to have what she has. And at least the UFC kind of evened it out with the way that they paid. And, they canceled her fight, so they tried to reimburse her a little bit for that. And I hope she just gets a fight lined up soon, whether it be a title fight or another contention.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too. I know a lot of times when they have a fighter weigh in as the backup fighter, they usually typically will get a title fight next. I know Amanda has mentioned maybe doing 145. Raquel's done 145 before. Obviously, Juliana Pena is obviously going to be in the mix. A lot of, murky waters there at 135, trying to figure out the next matchup there. Has obviously being a teammate of Raquel, I'm sure you've spoken to her. Any indication as to what's going to transpire there?
Penny is the problem. She has been a pain, it seems like, from a contractual standpoint for the title fight. She doesn't want to do anything except fight for the title. And so that's been a problem. She refuses to fight anybody else. And it's kind of just put a sticky wicket with everything. Why she's really getting, I don't know, catered to is the big question.
Gotcha. So while we're on this topic now of Raquel, I have to ask this question too. I know she's expected to be a mother pretty soon. I've been following along with her and Tisha on Instagram. It's been a great journey for the two of them. Just how's Tisha doing with the pregnancy? I'm sure you've probably seen her and out of the gym a little bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. I don't know how much I would be like to share from them, but they'll be having it within the next couple weeks. Yeah.
Okay, so big things going on there for that family. That's great to see. I know a lot of fans are excited to see the baby once it's born there. All right, one other thing, I guess, before we start wrapping things up, just to get your thoughts on this goes to the weight class that you're in, the flyweight division. Obviously, title change earlier this year. Everybody was a little stunned at it there. Alexa Grasso beating Valentina Shevchenko. Just your thoughts on that fight.
Yeah, I think Alexa's a sweet person. She's a great fighter. She's small for the division, but man, she came out swinging. She did the best she could. I honestly think that Valentina will get her title back pretty handily. She was winning the fight until she lost, which is always controversial. She made a mistake, and Alexa Grasso had great fight IQ, went in there and took advantage of it. I don't think that's going to happen 2 times in a row, but you never know. I think Valentina is still the top of the division, but I think Talia Santos is going to be a good contender coming up. I already think that was a pretty close decision that they had prior. And then we have a few of the other people coming up, the Manon Feroz, the Erin Blanchfield. There's a solid top 5 in the flyweight division for the first time, I think, ever. And we're finally starting to have the top 15 be a little bit better too, kind of weeding out the girls who don't really belong there, but haven't had the proper matchups in order to get them out of there.
Absolutely. I want to ask you that too. It's pretty crazy to think at one time everybody's like, oh yeah, the flyweight division, it's Valentina and nobody else. Now all of a sudden, I mean, like you mentioned, top 5 is well-rounded. The top 15 is filled with solid fighters, kind of, all within the last maybe, about year or so that it's kind of been taken over that way. Just talk about the rise of the division as a whole here, because it's really turning into one of, if it's not the best female division in the UFC, it's definitely pretty close up there with the strawweight division, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just building slowly. They had to keep finding the fighters. I don't think the Tough show did much help with that. It didn't really pick out that many girls that were up and coming. A lot of them had already been in the sport a long time or were older girls, which was interesting. I don't know why they didn't get some of the younger, or if it was just an odd lineup. Who knows? I was hoping that'd bring in some fresh blood. But, the Manon, the Erin Blanchfields, there's a lot of us that are pretty young coming up in the division that have a lot of good skill sets to bring into the cage. And I think it'll just continue being that way, whether it's some strawweights that come up, 135ers that come down, or just pure 125ers that are coming into the UFC. All
right, Miranda, just one other thing before we close things out here today. I know you're always helping out people that want to get better in the sport. You teach a lot of different seminars. I know you have a few coming up, one in my state of Pennsylvania, so anything like that that you have going on. I know you like to travel around and do a lot of those, so any of those coming up?
Yeah, I do have a lot coming up. For one, message me if you guys are interested in your gym having me out, no matter where it's at. Message me. We can try to get something figured out. But in June, right after my fight, I'm traveling home for a week, and then I'm going over to the East Coast. I have a seminar set up in North Carolina and Virginia and Florida, and I have a couple meet and greets, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. So check them out. If you guys are interested in having me out, contact me soon before I get another fight.
Awesome. All right, Miranda, thanks so much for all the time. I appreciate you answering all the questions here today. Just last thing, social media, so people know where to follow you at, management, sponsorships, anything like that you got to plug outside of the seminars. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you guys can follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. It's all at Fear the Maverick, spelled just the way it sounds. And you can go check out my gear, autographed pictures, shirts, all the above to support me for my fight at fearthemaverick.net. Check out everything. My management is LCA Sports Management. It's in my profiles. You guys can message them if you want interviews and stuff like that set up.